All right. Book 3, The Argument. Cicero, in the introduction to this book, laments the sad deaths of Crassus and Antinous. He then proceeds to relate Crassus's father's remarks on eloquence and especially on style and delivery, in which he was thought to excel all other speakers. See Cicero, De Clare Orators, chapter 38. He shows that an orator should speak correctly, conspicuously, elegantly, and to the purpose. Style is to be ornamented by a tasteful choice of words and by tropes and figures, and it must have a certain rhythm or harmony. Some observations are added on action and delivery in general. In chapter 14, a digression is made on the praises of eloquence and the combination of a knowledge of philosophy, especially the academic and peripatetic, with the study of it. 1. When I proceeded to execute my design, Brother Quintus, of relating and committing to writing in this third book the remarks which Crassus made after the dissertation of Antonius, bitter remembrance renewed in my mind its former concern and regret for the genius worthy of immortality, the learning, the virtue that were in Lucius Crassus were all extinguished by sudden death within 10 days from the day which is comprised in this and the former book. When he returned to Rome on the last day of the theatrical entertainments, he was put into a violent emotion by the oration which was reported to have been delivered in an assembly of the people by Philippus, who, it was agreed, had declared that he must look for another council, as he could not carry on the government with such a senate. And on the morning of the 13th of September, both Crassus and a full senate came into the house on the call of Drusus. There, when Drusus had made many complaints against Philippus, he brought formally before the Senate the fact that the council had thrown such grievous obloquy on that order in his speech to the people. Here, as I have often heard it, unanimously or unanimously said by men of the greatest judgment, although indeed it continually happens to Crassus whenever he had delivered a speech more exquisite than ordinary, that he was always thought never to have spoken better, yet be universal consent, it was then determined that all other orators had always been excelled by Crassus, but that on that day he had been excelled by himself, for he deplored the misfortune and unsupported condition of the Senate, an order whose hereditary dignity was then being torn from it by a council as by some lawless ruffian, a council whose duty it was to act the part of a good parent or trustworthy guardian toward it, but said that it was not surprising if, after he had ruined the commonwealth by his own counsels, he should divorce the councils of the Senate from the commonwealth. When he had applied these expressions, which were like firebrands to Philippus, who was a man of violence as well as eloquence, and of the utmost vigor to resist opposition, he could not restrain himself, but burst forth into a furious flame, and resolved to bind Crassus to good behavior by forfeiting his securities. On that occasion, many things are reported to have been uttered by Crassus with a sort of divine sublimity, refusing to acknowledge as a counsel him who would not allow him to possess the senatorial dignity. Do you, said he, who, when you thought the general authority of the whole senatorial order entrusted to you as a pledge, yet perfidiously annulled it in the view of the Roman people, imagine that I can be terrified by such petty forfeitures as those. It is not such pledges that are to be forfeited if you would bind Lucius Crassus to silence. For that purpose you must cut out this tongue, and even if it be torn out, the freedom in my very breath will confound your audacity. 2. It appeared that a multitude of other expressions were then uttered by him with the most vehement efforts of mind, thought, and spirits, and that resolution of his, which the Senate adopted in a full house, was proposed by him with the utmost magnificence and dignity of language, that the counsel and fidelity of the Senate had never been wanting to the commonwealth in order to do justice to the Roman people, and he was present, as appears from the names entered in the register at the recording of the resolution. This, however, was the last swan-like note and speech of that divine orator, and if expecting to hear it again, we used, after his death, to go into the Senate House, that we might contemplate the spot on which he had last stood to speak. For we heard that he was seized at the time with a pain in his side while he was speaking, and that a copious perspiration followed, after which he was struck with a chillness, and returning home in a fever, died the 7th day after of pleurisy. Oh, how fallacious are the hopes of mortals, how frail is our condition, and how insignificant all our ambitious efforts, which are often broken and thrown down in the middle of their course, and overwhelmed, as it were, in their voyage, even before they gain a sight of the harbor. For as long as the life of Crassus was perplexed with the toils of ambition, so long was he more distinguished for the performance of private duties and the praises due to his genius than for any benefit than he reaped from his greatness, or for the dignified rank which he bore in the republic. But the first year which, after a discharge of all the honorable offices of the state, opened to him the entrance to supreme authority by universal consent, overthrew all his hopes and all his future schemes of life. By death, this was a melancholy occurrence to his friends, a grievous calamity to his country, and a heavy affliction to all the virtuous part of mankind. But such misfortunes afterward fell upon the commonwealth that life does not appear to me to have been taken away from Lucius Crassus by the immortal gods as a privation, but death to have been bestowed on him as a blessing. He did not live to behold Italy blazing with war, or the Senate overwhelmed with popular odium, or the leading men of the state accused of the most heinous crimes, or the affliction of his daughter, or the banishment of his son-in-law, or the most calamitous flight of Cassius Marcius, or that most atrocious of all slaughters after his return, or finally that republic in every way disgraced, in which, while it continued most flourishing, he had by far the preeminence over all other men in glory.